This is Layman with the Fantasy Grounds Academy. Today I'm going to talk about something a little bit preemptively. This is kind of jumping the gun a little bit, I admit. The final One DnD rule set will not be out till September, but I wanted to go over some changes with you if you're not aware that there are some slight differences in the NPC stat blocks in regards to Fantasy Grounds. So I want to make that clear that this is mostly focused on the changes for Fantasy Grounds, not so much the 5e rule set. Apparently, those should be compatible, so you'd be able to use both. However, for my own personal sake, I am starting to transfer over or change to the newer format, which was introduced in 2022 with the Monsters of the Multiverse. So there are some slight changes with stat blocks in regards to how they're formatted. And there are also some new actions that I don't have access to yet unless you have playtest material, and even that may not be included in the newer or the latest edition when it's finalized. So I just wanted to kind of make you aware of the NPC stat block changes for the import tool, not so much trying to speculate too much on what's going to be included and what isn't in the One DnD upcoming rule set. So essentially what I wanted to go into is the NPC stat block tool. I've done videos on this several times. I'm going to keep doing it until people and myself get a good handle of how the NPC stat blocks work. And then also we're going to do a custom vampire and kind of customize that and use the new formatting. So what we're going to do is just take a stat block that I generated from the I guess this would be from the ChatGPT AI generative tool. And then also you could take something like Keith Amon's Monsters Know What They're Doing and add some of the tactical advantages that vampires confer when you use them in a game. They are pretty complex NPCs, and I chose this particular one because I have some artwork. It has spells, it has actions, it has all kinds of things. And we'll talk about some of the main differences that I've noticed lately in the trend of the NPC stat blocks that are coming out on D&D Beyond. It kind of gives you a preview of things to come as far as formatting goes. And then also the rule set, it right now as it stands, the 5e rule set already supports that format, so that's good. It has the Monsters of the Multiverse format, so Smiteworks had the foresight to go ahead and include that in the import tool, anticipating that they'd have to anyways eventually. So I don't know what the final edition is going to boil down to, if it's going to be a new rule set or what. So I'm not going to even go there. But insofar as the NPC stat blocks right now, I'm changing over to the newer format just to be ready for the upcoming changes. Don't have access to any of the official material, so I just want to make that clear. So this would all be just stuff I'm making up on the fly here. And then also using the capabilities that are already built in the Fantasy Grounds, which is really the main focus here. So I wanted to, first I'm going to get my pointer up here because I think it makes it hard to follow if I don't have some sort of guide so you can see what I'm clicking on and that sort of thing. So what we're going to do is take this vampire and put it into Fantasy Grounds. It'll be a kind of a custom version. So I've used this NPC generation type template for the Fantasy Grounds platform. So it basically we're going to create a custom One DnD vampire using this template, and this template comes from a D&D 5e stat block from Monsters of the Multiverse, so it already kind of has the proper formatting. The main changes that I noticed in the text and such is that when you get past the challenge rating and you start getting down to the traits area where that was in 5e, there's no longer a header that says traits, and they just simply list the non-mechanical ones that don't really have a mechanical property to it as much. So less, stuff that doesn't have a saving throw, attack roll. Most of that's up here above the actions. So you have a legendary resistance, regeneration, and then spider climbs, and then the vampire weakness. So these are things that are now sitting above the actions where they were traditionally under traits. So they got rid of the traits thing, and now they just list the traits there because it's obvious those are traits. And most of these don't have a real mechanical thing to it, like saving throws, attack rolls, damage, that sort of thing. And I think that's kind of the way they wanted to simplify the stat block. But if you're used to looking at older NPC stat blocks for 5e, you used to have a section up here called traits. And then underneath that, all of these traits were underneath there, including spellcasting, innate spellcasting, multi-attack, all that stuff. So now they've moved that underneath actions. So in the actions tab, that's for your multi-attack, your weapons, spells, those sort of things. So anything that really has like mechanics will be stored under actions now. So that's the main changes that you'll see. So the spellcasting statement is now underneath actions as well as the innate. One of the things that might throw off your game here is if you include the word traits up here between this challenge rating and all the traits listed. If you include that, I think the parsing tool gets confused and it will not put the spellcasting traits below. So I've ran into that, and I think some other community members have seen this as well, where they've tried to make the stat block a little bit more compliant with Monsters of the Multiverse. But what you want to do is leave off where it says traits. So you don't need to use that anymore, and just list the traits up here as you would before, except for the multi-attack, the spell casting, that sort of thing goes under action. So I have an older tutorial that I wrote up that I'm going to have to revise. But essentially, this is kind of like the way more to do with the ability scores and the acronyms. That's still a thing. So the way these are arranged here are actually the correct format. So if you have a stat block that you're copying and pasting from a source, make sure that the text looks like this before you say OK in the Fantasy Grounds import tool. So you can either do it this way, which is a traditional, which is horizontal, or the vertical way, which is from Monsters of the Multiverse. So either one of those will work. And this is a more blown up example of that. So that's usually what's broken on most stat blocks, is that part. Now on the other part of this is like a good example, and this is kind of the way it is now for 5e. But when you come down to, I'm going to do another one. So this is a bad example, like something that you probably wouldn't want. So you don't need all this as far as the bold goes. You don't necessarily need these colons. It's not going to hurt anything, but when you have this in the wrong order or the wrong wording, it's going to throw it off. So like, for instance, this is an acronym. That's probably not going to work. This way this is right here. That's not going to parse either. It's got to be where the ability score is above, or the acronym is above the ability score in either case, whether it's vertical or horizontal. Some of the other things are, like here, we don't need traits anymore. And these little bullet points might throw off the parsing tool depending on how they're formatted. And this thing here, this colon, is going to throw off the parsing. This hyphen is going to throw off the parsing, or if the comma. So it needs to have a period. So any traits that you want, you put the trait name with the period after it, and then you write out what it is. That's generally what throws off the parsing tool as well. So this traits thing is kind of a 5e thing. That's going away and in favor of just listing the traits without needing this header. The actions are going to be as such. So this club is actually looks like it's correctly formatted, but it is going to like, again, you're having these bullet points. You don't really need those. So it really is just a matter of little fine details why these things break and why you have problems if you're using the import tool or if you're kind of making your own. This type of information is available on the Fantasy Grounds Atlassian guide. Now, a lot of this caters around a traditional 5e stat block, but if you at least get it right to that, the rest of it's a lot easier to address. So this kind of goes in and explains what all of the fields are on the NPC stat block in regards to Fantasy Grounds. And then this even mentions traits here, but this is going to probably go away, or not necessarily go away, but not be used as much in the future. So older products will still have that. They should still work, but newer products probably won't list a header called traits, and the formatting would be slightly different. And then it goes into what all these extra things mean in the text, and then it goes into the spell casting, how you format that trait. So this is like a template, and it's exactly the way you want it to be, and then you just kind of fill in what spell changes you want and that sort of thing. Same thing with innate spells. So the wording must be exactly as above. So this is the main part of the issue. If you copy and paste from another source, or even if you're typing it out, it has to be the right format or it's not going to parse correctly. So it'll throw it off. One little period, one little hyphen, it's all it takes, and it just throws it off. So the actions are basically going to be expanded in the One DnD NPC stat block. So let's go into Fantasy Grounds and take a look at see if this actually works or not. So you can use the traditional stat block entries, or you can use the new Monsters of the Multiverse platform, or their formatting, which came out in like 2022. So basically, you got this vampire that I want to make. We don't have a good name for him. I just called him Vladimir, but essentially this is all AI generated images. But in Fantasy Grounds and in ChatGPT, I took this information and plugged it in. The other thing you can do is, like, I'm going to go to Keith Amon's website where he has vampire stuff related to, so the monsters know what they're doing, undead tactics, vampires. So there's a whole section here on just vampires and how you might play them. So I can take all this information, or most of it, and just plug it into ChatGPT, and then we can use that to summarize. See, here's the summary. I should probably just use that. But you can take this type of information here and copy and paste it into ChatGPT and use it to help you develop your stat block. So we can take this, and I'll say something like incorporate the main bullet points and tactics for GM notes and such. So this will help summarize what can be done with the vampire and help people run them. And I think this is something that's missing out of a lot of the newer content. I know back in the day they used to have like ecology, they used to have tactics. They kind of got rid of that to make it more simplified so you don't get overwhelmed with information. However, if you're new and you've never played before, I think having too much information is better than not having enough, because you end up looking and searching through a bunch of books and it just ends up being a nightmare in the middle of a game. And that's kind of why I include this stuff on the back of the character sheet or the NPCs. So this kind of gives the GM a overview of what these things can do without having to go and dig up all the resources and that sort of thing. And I think that the GMs will make up their own thing anyways, and it'll depend how the encounter plays out. But I really think that the lost thing here is that you don't have a clue as to how a traditional vampire works versus how it works in a given rule set, like between Pathfinder, Fantasy Grounds, D&D, what is that, Savage World. So that there's those little nuances too. So you have all this different types of rules that govern how this stuff works. But what I want to do is take the stat block, and so here's the vampire tactics, and then here is, I think I have a stat block. Yeah, so this is a One DnD playtest collation that I found on the home brewery. It's not official, but the documentation goes through all the revisions and changes through the playtest material. So it's kind of all centralized. And then I just uploaded that to a private, what do you call it? A private GPT session, so I can reference that. But this kind of goes and breaks down the changes that are coming from the playtest material, but these are not final. These are just kind of speculation and based off previous test material. So some of the stuff would be gone, it'd be replaced with other stuff. But that's kind of what started me down this path, was kind of researching, what happens to the NPC stat blocks. It started there because that was one of the main changes. Tasha's also changed some stuff with the way characters are developed. So those two books were pivotal in starting to push towards this One DnD thing. And I like some of the changes. Some of them I'm not certain about, but I'm not too worried about it. I think once people get the idea of how it's supposed to change and work, and it won't be too bad, but there are going to be some people that are purists that just want to play 5e, and I believe that the newer system is going to support most of that, at least in regards to the adventures and the accessories. I don't know necessarily about actual rules, because the characters are obviously changing quite a bit. So now that we have that out of the way, let's have let's do a custom vampire. And generally speaking, I like taking like the vampires and kind of copying and pasting this into Fantasy Grounds. This is a lot easier to do. And I'm going to say add the tactics, or add a tactics section at the end of the stat block, because I want it to add some more information so we can put it on the other tab. And this really just, you don't really have to do this. It's just for the sake of showing Fantasy Grounds, but also some use cases where you might actually want to incorporate these with your custom NPCs, or even adopt or update newer ones. So what this is doing is putting it in the format. This is the horizontal format. This will also work. You can do a vertical formatting, which is what Monsters of the Multiverse uses. So either way, as long as the ability score is above the ability score acronym is above the actual score, that's the main part. And then let me see what else they did here. So yeah, so it left off the traits. We don't need that anymore, and I think that throws off the parsing tool if you're trying to make it into a Monsters of the Multiverse platform. So if you're going to do it the old way, then leave the traits up there and do it like that, and use an older stat block. If you want something newer, look at Monsters of the Multiverse for an example, and it'll kind of show you the formatting. So this gets into all of the kind of the non-mechanical stuff. Like, these don't have a lot of mechanics in it, but the stuff in the actions do. So there's a multi-attack, unarmed strike, there's a bite, charm, that sort of thing. If it had spells, the spell casting would also be in there. So what I might do is ask it to create, ask it to create a spell casting variant, and kind of see how that looks. But this is just a kind of a preliminary thing. And what this is doing now is going through and incorporating some of those changes that came from the Monsters Know What They're Doing. Now, I'm not going to include every single thing, but this is just give you some ideas of how you can run the character, and goes over their abilities and their limitations. So I think it's kind of a cool way to beef up your NPCs. And to be honest with you, I think it'd be really cool if somebody would actually, aka me, maybe go through every single SRD monster and update the other tab on the Fantasy Grounds platform and add some of this stuff in here. Because, like, for instance, this feature here is a real pain in the butt if you don't have that stuff ready to go when you're playing. And I think that's one of the things that slows us down when we're playing, especially if you've never used the vampire before. It's going to slow you down quite a bit. So I think that that's something that we have to be careful with when we're running a game, and we won't notice that until we start really getting into the how it plays out. We'll just like sit there and go, oh crap, this, I didn't know we had to do these summons, or I don't want to use the summons right now because I don't have it ready. So I've done that where it says, you know, you can summon 2d4 swarms of bats or rats. So you should have those NPC stat blocks probably linked to the other tab. And I don't think that kind of stuff is in most of the content that's out there. So it'd be nice to have this ready to go in case you want to use that feature. Because to be honest with you, if I'm in the middle of a game and I wanted to use that feature and I wasn't prepared for it, I think I wouldn't do it. I think I just use something else. So that kind of limits you for time and such if you don't do this kind of thing ahead of time, or at least have an idea of how it works. And then there's just all kinds of little nuances like that that make a difference. So let's, what I want it to do is I want it to rewrite the NPC stat block above, but condense and pare down the tactics for ease of use, because that's way too, I have like the entire article in the back. That's not exactly what I wanted, and I didn't tell it that to begin with, so I should have said that up front when I had it generate this information, is to take that info and plug it in, and then give it some guidance as to what kind of output I want. So that's another thing about using generative AI tools, is you kind of have to give it an idea of the output you're looking for and not just focus on the input, because it's not going to have any idea of what the use case is. But in my situation here, for this particular thing, I'll take and give it a template of what I'm looking for, and then hopefully it'll grab that and use it. So it's something that, you know, you have to figure out on your own, and also something that you'll have to get used to when it comes to creating these kinds of characters. So we have that. So there's the legendary actions. So the tactics I would probably put on the others tab. I don't think I would include that. So I'm going to say write a short background and a description of Vlad for the Doll E3 app image prompt. So what I'm going to have it do is base it off of the stat block, and then I will have it generate some text that'll give us a background info and that sort of thing, and then give us a short prompt. So if you wanted to make an image after this, you could. So here's the image prompt. We could take that information and we could ask ChatGPT to create that. So I want to say create a detailed image of a, and then paste this in, a tall, pale-skinned vampire with sharp features and piercing eyes, dressed in elegant, dark, I'll say gothic clothing. He stands in a grand gothic castle with shadows and moonlight casting an eerie glow. I'll say casting an eerie glow. His expression is a mix of cunning and predatory hunger, reflecting his Gothic architecture. The vampire's posture is regal, exuding his. Okay, I'm going to say he is bearing his fangs, and he is horrific. I like vampires that look really like icky, like scary. I don't like the ones that are too gentleman-like. I know that's part of the culture, but I kind of like them more like monsters, you know, like demons or something. Let's see. So he's bearing his fangs, and he is horrific in appearance. So I want him to look kind of freakier. And then I'm going to say something like expert Dungeons and Dragons art or character art. That tends to give the generative tool more of a direction as to kind of what you're after. It's not perfect, but it gives you, a little bit more direction. And I'm going to say photorealistic. So even though it's not going to be, it's going to make it a little bit less cartoony and a little bit more like digital graphics in a sense. And then you can ask it to make it a certain orientation, but I'm just going to let it do its thing because sometimes I've asked it to do vertical, like a full body, and it won't do it, so I don't even bother with that anymore. It does what it does. It all depends on what you put, like this castle interior. It's probably going to put it in landscape because it's going to try to show that. So when you ask it for background information, it's going to try to pull in everything, and it'll either make it square or it'll make it vertical. In this case, it did do it the long way, so that's not too bad. This is a kind of like your traditional vampire. It is scary enough for me, but as you can see, I don't care for the eyes. The hands look okay. Usually those are jacked up. That's pretty good. This is something that I don't think I like it. So what you can do is, if you have ChatGPT, you can go in, you can select the image, and you can update his face. Like basically, I want the face to be, going to make it more horrific and detailed because it looks kind of distorted. I mean, it's not bad, but it's not quite what I had in mind. So it kind of gave us that traditional Gothic look because of the way we worded it. But I wanted him to be a lot scarier looking. I don't like it when they look like a gentleman all the time. It just it's kind of off-putting and cliche kind of. So that's kind of why I'd like doing it that way. I don't mind some of those traditional elements, but I want it to look scary. So when people see it, yeah, that's a lot better. Yeah, that looks more like David Bowie. Exactly what I was looking for. But again, I mean, he's got these reddish eyes, but this is kind of cool. I like it. So I can handle that. But now what I want to do is say, okay, I'll say based on the image and prompt above, create the vampire's anthropomorphic bat-like humanoid form with horrific features. So I wanted to create something kind of similar, but more bat-like and kind of freaky. That kind of like that half stage. I know you guys have seen movies where they, like, in between transforming from a humanoid into a bat, they kind of have that kind of gargoyle kind of look. So we'll see if it can handle that. Sometimes it will work if it has enough reference. Sometimes it has to start over. So once in a while you can base it off of a previous prompt, but after 2 or 3 tries, you usually have to start over with prompting for images. So it kind of loses its focus after a while. So if you keep doing the same thing, saying do it like this, and oh yeah, this is way cooler. See, this is what I had in mind for creature type, and it's way more detailed, which I really appreciate that. That is really cool. So this is kind of what I would use for my game if I was going to run a game like that. Is really cool. So now what I want to do is I'll show you the difference. So I want to take this information right here. So based on the image and prompt above, I'm just going to reword it a little bit. And I'll say from the vampire's bat-like form. I'll say full vampire bat-like form. And that way we have different states. So I might go back and redo the vampire, but it looks kind of like David Bowie, so I'm cool with that. At least it's kind of weird and off-putting. I didn't want it to be too like handsome, you know. I want it to be kind of weird looking, like he's undead, you know, not like he's a real person or something. Because I think more modern, yeah. So this, see, it kept the humanoid form. So this is what I'm saying. You have to reprompt it. But this is even cooler. I like this even better. This is more like scary, like creepy. Yeah, I like it. So this is just, you know, just some ideas that you can throw out there. So what I'll have to do is rewrite the prompt entirely and then go in and have it make the bat form. So what I would do is copy this entire thing and then reword it and then just kind of go into create a detailed image of a horrific vampire bat with sharp features and piercing red eyes. And I'll say something, get rid of all this stuff because has to do with this has to do with this humanoid form. So I'm going to say eerie claws and malevolent nature. The castle interior is blah blah blah. It is, instead of he, it is bearing its fangs and has a horrific appearance. So this is just little things that you can do to kind of salvage some of your prompting, because that's kind of what this is all about, is how you prompt this. So when you're going to do images, that is. And mind you, this is for homebrew stuff, so I'm not really building anything official. So this is just for my own purposes, but I think this helps people with their homebrew games. So if they want to make stuff, maybe this will help you guys with that. So piercing, eerie claws, malevolent nature. Create a detailed image of a, I'll say a dark and evil vampire bat with sharp features and piercing red eyes. Eerie claws, eerie sharp claws. I'll just say sharp claws and a malevolent nature. Yeah, castle, a castle interior. Okay, the castle. I don't mind if it's inside the castle. I'll say exterior because maybe this will be outside instead. So I'm going to get rid of the castle exterior. Is a gothic, creating an atmosphere of eerie elegance and dark grandeur. All right, we'll see. The vampire. Yeah, we don't need this. So this is just editing the previous prompts. So I don't have to start completely over. But how many changes I made, I might as well have. All right, so we'll see if it generates something better. So I asked it to make the vampire and then make a hybrid, and then I asked it to make a bat. Well, it kind of stuck on that humanoid part, so I had to redo the prompt. So this is actually really cool. I like that front end view, that it's coming straight at you. That is really nice. So I could live with that. So what I would do with these is I'd copy the image, and in this case I would use like this Canva thing here and just add another page and to just paste these in here and use that for future stuff. Maybe I won't use it for this, but it might use it for something else. So that's just kind of a little side thing there with creating content, ChatGPT style. Yeah, that really turned out really nice. So I don't know. What do you guys think? Should we use this guy here with this claws, or did you like this one? I honestly, I like the pose here better and some of the details, but I actually like how scary this one looks. this one looks way more demonic than the other one did. The other one looks more animalistic. This one looks more demonic. But anyways, I might just copy both of those just so I have them. That way I don't lose the track of them. But I think that this one matches with this a little bit better. So that's why I'm asking. Let's see what else we have here. Yeah, so this thing here, copy that image, and then, like I said, we're going to go into the stat block momentarily. So see, these look very similar, but they do have a different appearance overall. Let's see, what else do we have here? So I wanted to grab the vampire itself. Yeah, I'm still not keen on the way he looks, but it'll pass. I mean, it's just for homebrew, right? It's not like we're selling it. So here's a example of some of the poses, and and I'll grab the other one just in case. This is the one that looks more gentleman-like. I have another tool I can use to kind of work on the face a little bit better. I could put more makeup on it and stuff, but nah, whatever. So I'm going to copy the image and go into this, Canva and paste it in there. So this is just a kind of like my placeholder. So what I think what we could do with this, since they look kind of similar, is kind of match these up. So this one I think looks cooler with this David Bowie looking guy. I think this one matches with him better. And then this one matches with the gentleman more. That could be a thing, but you can see their clothing's different, but still. I think the way it kind of plays out, it kind of looks better that way. Yeah, so what I would do with these is maybe make tokens or pogs out of them, or just show them in Fantasy Grounds as they are. Like for instance, like this one here, the bat, I might make an expanded version of it and then put it in Fantasy Grounds to use it as like a kind of like a wallpaper. So you take something like this and copy it and put it in this page here. And one of the cool things about Canva is you can expand images if you need to. So for instance, this might be something that you need to work out. Now this probably won't work very well because it's too big of an area, but there is an image edit tool, and it is called expand. And what it will do is we want it to expand in the whole page. And this isn't a good use case because it's way too much. Like if the image is less than half of the screen size, I might want to use this in a square instead of that rectangle. It probably won't look very good because it's way too much. Yeah, it's not bad. So it took what it could and kind of placed it in there. So like I said, this is a little bit too much for it to digest. Like it's not bad, but it's kind of blending in. And this is an AI feature that's built into the tool itself. But you can expand, like if you had an image that's missing like a corner, or let's say there was something in the picture and you wanted to edit it out, but then you didn't want a blank space in there. That's what this is good for. It isn't good for expanding 1/3 of an image across a large space and a large area. It's good for like edge details, like like if you had like a picture that you wanted to fix or to make it more useful. Yeah, see, it can't handle that much change. I like the way I know where it's going, but it can't handle it. It's just too much. So this is kind of asking too much out of it. Like I like how this turned out. Looks like you're looking out a window or like a broken glass thing here. But nonetheless, you can see the deformities. It's way too much. It's better if you have either a smaller area to fill or like just a portion of the image needs to be fixed. This is like way too much for it. So this kind of gives you an idea of some of the limitations of generative AI tools. Is it has to have more reference than it does creation. So in this case, like I said, it was only 1/3 of the image was filled and the rest was blank. So it did its best to fill this in, which I appreciate. And to be honest with you, I might take out this image and to just kind of use this as a silhouette or texture for an image in Photoshop or something like that. I don't necessarily this isn't completely throwaway, but it's kind of useless. Like I don't like these distorted bats, and it kind of looks weird. But anyways, that's just something you can do with this generative AI tools. And it's in everything now. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people that are upset right now. I know that Adobe did something weird where they were going to ask, or they were going to force to use people's content somehow. I'm not very informed on it, but I know there's a recent backlash on it. There's a lot of people pissed off. But anyways, it's in everything now. So it's inevitable. There's just so much of it out there right now. It's ridiculous. I hope they can get a happy medium between, generative use and, like for just creative endeavors, I like it. But if you're going to do it for commercial use, you got so many people pissed off right now. They're like, "Oh my God, I'm losing my job," and I in a way I can't blame them because it's pretty incredible what it can do. I have a I have a sneaky hunch that they're going to take this to school. Like they're going to use this for educating children, and I don't know if that's a good idea or not. But when COVID-19 was out, they kind of tested it out to have hybrid learning or to learn at home. And I hate to say this, but they can upload a national curriculum, a state curriculum, a city curriculum, and a school curriculum, and use those as guidelines to create their learning materials. And then they can also look at, if someone makes like a test, or like a teacher makes a test, they can take that test, analyze it, reword it, and change it up, and within context of the lesson, and then publish that as the new test for the quarter. So that would be like instantaneously almost. So it can take that data and restructure it and base it off the reading, and then they can actually scan an entire book if they wanted to and use that for their curriculum and pull out the stuff that they want the students to learn, and probably less than a third of the time it would have taken them traditionally. So I think the learning tools are really going to change in the next 10 years, but we'll see. Anyway, so back on topic. So we kind of got an idea of the vampire. So I want to go back in and let's get back to what we were doing here. So let me change that and let's get back into the stat block. Okay, so when the stat block is fully created and has everything right, or formatted in the right properties, you can take this information and copy it and paste it into Fantasy Grounds. So I'm going to do a copy and go into the Fantasy Grounds platform. And by the way, this is a theme made by Voss. It's free. It's on the Fantasy Grounds Forge. If you guys are interested, it's the Fantasy Grounds Academy, I guess, official theme, and he's revised it. It works with most of the rule set. So anyways, so unless you have a lot of extensions that change the character sheets around, then it might be a little goofy then. Let's see. So, and it already has a built-in font that's increased, so you don't have to use a font sizer. He's already kind of went to the maximum that he can without it clipping. Let's see. So in your campaign setting, the only thing I have loaded, by the way, is in modules area. I just have the SRD. I don't have anything else. I just use that for reference and for like a starting point, but generally speaking, I don't need all the rules loaded to do this. So if you go into NPCs, it'll list all the ones that are in the SRD. And these are fair game for modification and such. So you can make a copy of an existing one. So let's go with Vampire. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, so there's Vampire and Vampire Spawn. So when you open this up, this is kind of what you're getting. And I know that Doug went in and changed the artwork, so you have the full version, you have the flat, and then you have the token view, which is what I would do with those other images, is make a full body and then make a face and then make like a beautiful artwork one so that you can show your players. But anyway, so this has all the basics. So this has a traditional stat block. This is traits, and it has all the traits listed and then the attacks. So this is the traditional stat block. Well, let's see what happens with the version I have. And then for notes, there's nothing. So a lot of times on the SRD, there's not a whole lot back there. I think the Monster Manual version has a few things on here. So now what I want to do is import stat block, but I want to make my own group first. So you always, whenever you make your own data, it's best practices, you don't have to, is to make your own group. So click the drop down, click the green plus button, it adds a category. And this is for organizational purposes and sorting. And if you want to end up exporting your work, this will make it simpler to do that. So I'm going to take and put in custom NPCs. It's a new category. Now this doesn't have anything in it yet, but now I'm going to bring up the import text. So this little hamburger menu down at the bottom is where I'm going to copy and paste in the data from the stat block. So I'm going to hit Control V, and as you can see, all this text is in here. It looks okay. We'll see what happens. If you want a kind of a preview of what it might look like, you can right click and go to clean up text. It does it automatically when you hit import, but if you want to get a better view, it kind of just removes the spaces out of there. And now we have the tactics. So this tactics thing, I don't want that in the stat block because that will break the parsing. That's not something that I would put there. It's going to be on the other tab. So that way when it parses, it's not going to break this. So here's the tactic. So I might, put that in here, and then I'm going to pre-format it. So I'll make this a header and then maybe bold these things out so that they stand out when the stat block is generated. So these are just extras that I added from the tactics from Keith Amon's work. And that way, when you're using it, you have a little bit more of an idea of what these guys might do in combat. And you could do it the way you want, but at least you have some guidelines. And then let's go back to, let's see, what did I do? Okay, here we go. So there was a section here where I was making the background before I got involved and distracted with making images. So here is the lore part. So this is his like backstory kind of. So I want to take something like this and add that to the import section in Fantasy Grounds so it includes it. You can do it after the fact, but I like doing it ahead of time. So this, right click, clean up the text, and then make this Control 2 and highlighted the text to make that a header. And then this is his kind of like his write-up, and then here are the tactics. And if you wanted to add the minions, what we'll do is I'll leave that here in case, and then later on we're going to link those to this section. So this will make it easier to run this character or this NPC later on. So I'll just leave that there, and when it's time, I'll link the minion NPCs to at least have those ready to go, or even in encounters, we'll see. But now that's all in there, now I want to do is hit import. And before I close this window, I'm going to move this aside, and here's the entry now. And I want to look this over, and I'll compare it with the other. Yeah, see, it added these in as traits, which is part of the older system. Yeah, it's still kind of doing it the old way, but it works. It's fine. It's not going to hurt anything. I want to see if it says traits in here. Yeah, it doesn't say traits, but anyways. It didn't have spellcasting, so it didn't seem to throw it off too much. But as you can see, the vampire here, this is the original on the right-hand side. So it's a little different. I'd say a lot. So what I might put here for the non-ID name is put vampire, male vampire, something like that, and then turn off the identification. So when I add it to the combat tracker, it's just going to say male vampire instead of Vladimir, the ancient vampire, because I want them to learn his name later. So that way it doesn't get, divulged right away. And then let's unlock this, can we? No, this is read only. So let me go to read only here. So let's see. 18, yeah, so his stat blocks are really bumped up. This is a challenge rating 18. The regular vampire is 13. So this is all different. Shape changer. This has some more information about the shape changing. So I might want to revise that if I need to. But other than that, most of this stuff is, let's see, Misty Step. This is Misty Escape. So, I mean, there's some differences here in how this thing works and how it moves out. So there's a little difference. So this is a custom. Remember, this isn't the official thing. Let's see if the languages are the same. So it just says the language is new in life for the original, but this one says common, draconic, and infernal. So, this is a unique or, different type of vampire, I guess, if you want to look at it that way. And of course, on the back, there's nothing back there. So this gives you that nice summary when you use the import tool. I really like that. Kind of gives you a breakdown of everything. Looks really clean. I like it. It's hard to get this to do this without the import tool. So if you use the import tool, even if it's a stat block that you already have that's older, you can get the summary out of that if you redo it through the import tool. So then you would just go ahead and start working on the art. Maybe you would make tokens for it, all that stuff. I'm not going to do that today. That's a whole nother video, but you kind of get the idea of some of the stuff. But I do want to mention let's go into the minions. So I want to unlock this. I left this little placeholder here. So at the very least, I would go into the NPCs and would take and put in, let's go to swarm of bats. Let's see, where does that say children of the night? I know there was something here about that, about summoning bat or vampire form, children of the night. So here we go. So that didn't come over on here for some reason. At least I don't see it. So I'll add that to this, but I think you do it once per day, but you can get swarms of bats or rats. So what you can do with that is take those information from there and make sure that you at the very least, link that back here, because that makes it so much easier down the road when you're running this NPC to try to dig through through the rule set looking for that stuff. It just takes too long to do it in the middle of a game. So I would probably take and add that to the stat block ahead of time, so you're not digging through everything looking for it. So swarm of bats, and then we're going to go with the rats. So swarm of rats. So you can do that. And that way you have it ready to go. So you're not looking for it. And you can also make these encounters ready to go. So even if you don't want to just include the stat blocks, you can make encounters with it. So let me see what this says first. So it's saying that vampire does 2d4 swarms of bats. Okay. So while outdoors, vampire can call 3d6 wolves instead. So you might put a wolf stat block on here too. So let me try that. Wolf. There's a wolf right there. So this is what I'm saying, that going through these stat blocks, you're going to find that there's a little bit of missing data. When it's not missing in regards to fantasy grounds or whatever, but for running the game, it's missing. Like, it's missing in the fact that you're going to have to dig through everything just to find it, and that's time consuming. So this is something you might do ahead of time, and then on top of that, what you can do is make a table that will roll how many he summons if you don't want to preordain that. So you can do it once per day. So 2d4 swarms of bats or rats. Honestly, I think that's a little overkill. I think I just have 2 or 3 swarms. You know, I don't think 8 swarms of bats or rats is necessary. Maybe 4. And then it says 3d6 wolves. So if you wanted to randomize that, you could build tables and have that, you know, set up that way. Or you can make an encounter for each creature type, make it a random encounter. And what I would do is take these NPCs, and I would make 3 separate encounters, like the different swarms or the different summons. And then what I might do is change that up a little bit, and I kind of make it my own thing. So I'm just going to link these creatures into these random encounter areas. And then this is going to be wolf summons, I guess you can call it. This is going to be bats summons. And then this would be useful also if you have a spellcaster that has this kind of thing, like call woodland animals, you know, that sort of thing. Because this is where things get clunky and slow down. All right, so it says, how many wolves does it say? 3d6. Yeah, so you can do that. 3d6. And then it says 2d4 for the others, I believe. Yeah, so 2 dog 4, and then 2 dog 4 here. There we go. So those would be your kind of like your summons, and then you could make these encounters right off the get-go. So instead of just doing the NPCs, you might as well just put the encounter, and these would be random encounters that you could use for this particular NPC. And what I would do here then is replace this stuff with the encounters instead. That's nice for reference, but it doesn't help you during the game that much. Makes it a little quicker, but it doesn't help you run in the game. So we're going to put the encounter here, and then we'll put the bats, and then we will put the rats or the mice, whatever, swarm of rats. There we go. So there's the 3 summons that you might use. So now when you go to use this in your game, it's not going to be as inconvenient. So if I'm running this character or this NPC, and let's go to the stat blocks and get everything lined up. So this is how I'd have this. So this would be the combat tracker. Put the NPC on the combat tracker, obviously, and then you can see it says male vampire instead of Vladimir. And then when you need to, when it comes time to running this encounter, you pop up whatever one of these you want. Let's say they're outdoors. So I'm going to open up this summons, click generate. That generated 9 wolves. At this point, if you think that's too much or too little, you can unlock that and change it. So let's say I only want 5 instead. And then add to tracker, or you can add it to a quick map if you have something ready. You can refresh this to redetermine the CR level, and then add to tracker. So that would make that much quicker and much easier to use than just saying, oh, you get the ability to summon this, this, and that. Well, yeah, that's great. But in the middle of a game, especially if you're not familiar with this kind of NPC, you don't have this sort of thing ready, it kind of sucks. I mean, I don't care what VTT you use. If that's not ready to go, it's not ready to go. And you probably won't use it. To be honest with you, if I was in the middle of a game or in the middle of battle and I wanted to run this NPC and I wasn't aware, and then I read that and go, oh, shit, I got to go and find it. Then I got to put it, that's way too much work. Way too much work. So doing this ahead of time, especially for a big boss, I don't know if I'd do this for every single NPC, but definitely for like a boss or, like a final battle, you want this kind of stuff in place. And I think that Fantasy Grounds gives you that ability, but I don't know if people have enough experience or enough foresight to do that. And I think that's where a lot of the frustration comes in with running virtual tabletop, is that when you're not used to all these little nuances and use cases, you don't really have any good examples of how to do it. And I think that's some people find and discovered on their own, like I did. I didn't know all this stuff going into it. I just knew the basics. I didn't know anything, to be honest. I just started using it, and when it became an inconvenience, then I started looking at it. And I don't necessarily turn to extensions every time either. Sometimes this just needs to be done. You just need to do it, And other times you can use an extension to help things along. But in this case, this is kind of a matter of organizing your information. That's really what this is. This tool is for organizing information. It's not for playing video games. Not it's for organizing your content, and then you have to find a way to present it to your players. And that's really what this is learning that dynamic between people learning how to use a platform, they're learning how to use Discord, they're learning the rule set, they're learning their character, they're learning the technology that's required to play, like how to set up Fantasy Grounds, install it. You got all that stuff. So you add all that up, it's a long day for sure. So when I've run stuff for conventions, this is the kind of thing you want to do ahead of time. If you're running at a table and you're just trying to have fun and you don't really care, then you don't have to do all that. But I think this helps a lot when you have these sorts of things in place. So like artwork, for instance, I would do that too. That would be my next step, is to replace this artwork with something a little bit more presentable. Like I might make this flat token with the images that I have. I can go to that website. I know a lot of people know about that Roll Advantage token stamp. You can use that to at least get a flat token. You don't necessarily have to have the full body and the 3D thing. But if I was going to do the full body, I would use one of those images that I generated earlier, and I had it on Canva. So if I went into Canva, I'd probably use one of these images and just make a flat token out of it. Hey, Dan. And just use this for, whatever I need it for. So I might take this image, for instance, and use that and to just make a pog out of it. And then if I wanted a full body thing, I'd probably redo the entire prompt and do some, because this is kind of close to a full body, but you can see the space up here is kind of useless. But I think, honestly, the full artwork and a pog is good enough. You don't necessarily have to have the three-dimensional token. But it is nice when you do. So that's just things that you would do to prep for a big encounter. Like if you're going to run Curse of Strahd, I'd want to have all that stuff kind of in place for the big boss, at least for Strahd. I don't know if you'd necessarily do that for every single NPC. That's way too much work. But at least for your big, like your generals and your big bad guys, I would definitely have this stuff ready to go. And ready to go means knowing what they can do, having these things spelled out for you so that you can just click on it and go. You don't have to dig through the entire rule set looking for this stuff, because that's where things slow down. And then, like, for instance, Misty Step. Yeah, that's great, but, it would be nice to have a link to the spell. Maybe I don't know what it does. That's the other thing, is you could do stuff like that. Like if you have the material available to you, like access to the spells, let's say that's in the character facing stuff. So you might have, let's see if this is not proprietary. So there's Misty Step right there. Okay, now you have the information, so you can link that to here, and that way you have at least a reference to it. You're not looking around. As you can see, I had to go over here, search for it. You're doing that takes forever. So having this available might save you some time. I'm not saying if you don't use it, I mean, that's one thing, but it's better to have it than not. And this will say, okay, it's a bonus action. Well, I didn't know that, or I don't remember that necessarily. So I might put a B right there, so I know that it's a bonus action. And then it says 30 feet. Well, it already says that here. It's instantaneous. Now, this is kind of a cool thing here. If you take this briefly surrounded by silvery mist, you teleport up to 30 feet. So I might want to incorporate a description of what it looks like when he uses that ability. That will add to the story. Instead of saying, oh, he just disappears and reappears over here, you could say, well, a silvery mist surrounds him, and then all of a sudden he materializes like 30 feet away. You can use this stuff to your advantage and not have to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of stuff here for you. So anyways, guys, I think I rambled for quite a bit. Hopefully that helps you guys when it comes down to running your games and such, and also creating content. So that's kind of what I've been focused on over the last 6 months, is creating content, best practices, how to use Fantasy Grounds in a more productive way. This is just suggestions. You guys can do whatever you want. You don't have to. You can say that guy sucks. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Whatever. It doesn't hurt my feelings. I just know that one of the stumbling blocks and the things that tend to become irritation or pain points when you're running a game, that's really when it comes down to is, having that stuff ready to go. It's a little bit of prep up front, but it pays off a lot and at the, afterwards, because then you're not feeling, good. Yeah, exactly. It's good to see people's flow, and there's not a lot of good use cases out there. If you watch actual plays, you might get one accidentally, but are you really going to go through the whole video just to find that one little thing? And that's part of the problem I have with the videos that I do, is I'll go on for an hour and there might be one little passage that somebody wants, but there's really no way to capture that or to know what someone needs. You just kind of get lucky. But at least this is a little bit more focused and not going through a 4-hour video with people playing and then maybe getting a use case, and then you don't have links necessarily as to what resources they're using. At least in this video, when I'm done, you'll have the resources for that. So that's the other good thing, is I can link a lot of the lore and the whatever I need to in the description to kind of help out. Anyways, folks, take care.